Hello, this is Paul Sandhu. You will be listening soon to an interview that I did with Jim Willie on Saturday the 26th, and which I'm posting today on Monday the 28th. Because I had to do some editing, there were some audio issues. One of the problems with Dr. Willie is that he's down in Costa Rica, and most of the time, or sometimes anyhow, the connection is not always the best. So there are some dropouts, or there can be some static on the line. So I ask the listeners to be kind, that yes, I think overall this recording is very good, and most of it, the audio quality for most of it is really good. There are some portions that I'm giving you a heads up may have some audio issues, so please overlook those and enjoy the information that Dr. Willie alone can bring to us, his followers and listeners. I also want to thank everybody that supports my channel and spreads this, shares the information that I post on here, and also those who help me financially, because it is my desire to do more of these programs. So which means that I need to essentially not have so much time to spend on my day job, let's say. Okay, so your help is appreciated, and I thank you for it. Also, my bumper music, my Wake Up and Live music, it starts right after this intro. It is about 25 seconds long. Some people love it, some people hate it. So those who hate it, please fast forward. Thank you for listening. This is Paul Sandhu.
You gotta wake up to a world that's real. You gotta rise up and make it feel. Life in full measure is more than just pleasure. Wake up and live.
Hello and welcome. Today is Saturday, September the 26th, 2015. This is Paul Sandhu coming to you with another episode of Wake Up and Live Radio. Joining me today is a very popular and repeat guest, Dr. Jim Willie, editor of the Hat-Trick Letter, found on his website, goldenjackass.com. Jim Willie needs no further introduction, so without further ado, hello and welcome, Jim.
Oh, hey, Desh, it's good to be back on, and, as usual, my typical intro line is things are moving fast. They're not only moving fast, the events are starting to converge and move up to a new level of critical importance. So, let's just get right into it. What do you say?
Absolutely. You're right. I have noticed too in the last week or so in particular, things are happening on many different fronts. And one of the big stories that broke last week was this Volkswagen, about the troubles of Volkswagen. Now, in the simplistic way that mainstream media reports it, this is just something to do with emissions and some fraud involving emission tests, but I think it's a bigger story than that. So why don't we jump right in, and you could tell us what you know about it and how we should be perceiving it as opposed to what they report on CNBC.
Yeah, what's typically reported on CNBC, Wall Street Journal, and all the major networks tends to be in support of the elite and the system wonks, and how they want you to think of it and how they want you to avoid the real issue. So I think there are three major issues here involved. I honestly believe, I've given this some thought now for a couple of days, I think this is the biggest story of the year. It's far bigger than no rate cut from the Fed. I mean, they couldn't. Come on, get with it. All right, there are three major issues here involved with the Volkswagen case. Number one is retaining dollar-based sales, retaining dollar-based supply chain, international trade settlement for the biggest car maker in the world. I thought for the longest time that Toyota was number one in the world. Maybe it's a neck and neck race, but I'm told that Volkswagen is number one. They've got an enormous Chinese presence. Toyota has a presence in China, but I'm not sure. General Motors has a very big presence in China. There was an event just 3 or 4 weeks ago where the Germans in VW, I'm going to call it VW, opened up a very big engine plant in Russia, in a place called Kaluga. Now, okay, to be sure, they cut back on some of their production of the engines at the plant due to economic problems and ruble currency shifts and all that, the usual stories. But the point is, for the number one point, the U.S. wanted to keep Germany, through its Volkswagen horse, on the dollar leash. So let's keep the biggest car maker in the world, and they, from what I'm understanding, they're also quite innovative. So let's keep the biggest and most innovative car maker in the world on the dollar leash, and it'll be a message to the other German industrial centers: don't vary, don't get off the dollar path. Okay, that's number one. The second one has to do with the deceptions. The U.S. used in emission violations. To begin with, I'm going to try to be briefer about this because I could go on for easily an hour about Volkswagen alone. The United States has its own environmental protection standards for emissions. Europe has its own. There's software inside the Volkswagen engine system, you know, the chips and all the control devices, where they can just switch over and say, all right, this is a manufactured car, and we're going to be using it in North America. We're going to be testing the emissions here. So we switch over to the U.S. side.
Right.
And what the U.S. did was they used some just plain as day deceptions and said, oh, no, this is in violation. Well, gosh, if you turn it off, yeah, it's in violation. They said that Volkswagen had admitted their error, their deception, and I don't believe that for a minute. What I think happened is they found a reason, emissions, and it was phony. They just wanted a reason to fine. And General Motors had a problem a year or so ago about fires from ignition problems. The ignition system went kooky and started a fire. 174 people were killed.
Right.
And they fined them under $1 billion.
Correct.
But Volkswagen has a phony emissions standard violation, and they're fined $18 billion? Are you kidding? This stinks. All right, there's more to it. Volkswagen has made some of the best emission efficiency progress of all the car makers in the world.
They're great cars. I don't doubt. I mean, I know many people that have had Volkswagen and I had myself, and they are really they swear by them.
My point has nothing to do with comfort, cornering, acceleration, or anything like that. It has to do with gasoline and diesel efficiency.
Yes, exactly my point.
It also has to do with carbon dioxide emissions. So we had perhaps some interference with this BS bullshit carbon tax global warming nonsense. VW was on the verge and is on the verge of making a mockery of some of the arguments. There's a third thing, and this is, I think, equally important. All right, and there's a third issue, and it could be important. I think all three are important, but the third one that seems to be important has to do with platinum. Platinum is the key metal involved in catalytic converters, and that's directly related to the device of emission control. Okay, so you got the dollar involved, you got emissions and efficiency involved, and you've got platinum involved. And here's what I think might have happened. We put our heads together, and especially Euroraj, who's former London Center banker, and he's just an extraordinary analyst, and he's got a nose. Gosh, he's got a nose. He said, here's what I think might be going on. He does a little checking, and here's what he came up with. It appears that Volkswagen was on the verge of liquidating a very large batch of platinum contracts. And platinum and gold are very closely related, not tightly linked, but they're related. So maybe there was some concern that the boys were going to lose their control over precious metals and the platinum group together on the paper side. And we're going to continue to watch this because there's some little developments going on in the platinum market that are unusual, and I don't have a full grip on it. But I'd like to make two little concluding points regarding the VW case, the Volkswagen case. Actually, three. The first is that in the Tianjin case, the Tianjin explosion in China, that was just a month ago.
Yes.
Okay, what was the brand of the car where 3,000 units on the inventory lot were destroyed?
Volkswagen, are they?
Exactly. Okay, so is there a link between potential? I'm going to be careful in my wording because nothing is certain here. Is there a link potentially between the explosion in Tianjin, sabotage possibly in Tianjin, China, and the Volkswagen case where $18 billion penalty when General Motors had under $1 billion penalty for killing 174 drivers on their GM cars. So this is a message clearly to the German leaders and to the German industrial captains. Stay within the dollar lanes. The second major point is that it looks like once again the U.S. government is using a corporate attack mode pardon me, in a similar way as in the past. I'll describe three others in the past. Two are similar. The two big Swiss banks are UBS and Credit Suisse. There were cases 2 years ago, maybe a little more, where the U.S. found them guilty of opening tax evasion accounts for Americans and even doing some work to evade the Iran sanctions. So the Lord of the universe, U.S. government, Washington, D.C., decided that they're the rule maker and they're the judge, jury, and executioner, and they declared UBS and Credit Suisse in violation, came up with multi-billion-dollar fines, took control of some of their operations, and proceeded to steal the Gulf Emirate, as in Saudi, gold held in the Swiss bullion banks. So, using the cover of corporate prosecution for violations, they took control of the big Swiss banks and stole the Arab gold. Okay, not a nice thing to do. And that has prompted other things regarding the Saudis, and I think has prompted them to pull the plug. The Saudis pulled the plug on the petrodollar machinery, which resulted in the dollar starting to rise rapidly and the crude oil price to be cut in half. There was one other case of a bank. It was BNP Paribas, a big French bank in Paris. That's what the P is for Paris. They were found to be in violation. I can't even remember what the Mickey Mouse violation was, but word has it that they were assisting the BRICS nations in converting treasury bonds to gold. Okay, now we have Volkswagen with a Mickey Mouse emission charge, a gigantic fee. And, you know, it's even possible that we're going to see in the near future some kind of a deal where an American company buys out Volkswagen's subsidiary in the United States. The last point I want to make is a conclusion point. We're seeing some of the ugliest elements of the fruit from the fascist business model that really was instituted and planted after 9/11. Patriot Act, all these different things. TARP funds, $800 billion for the big banks, followed by 0% interest rate, followed by QE. QE is nothing like what they describe. It's a gigantic backdoor bailout and cover that offers a policy that offers them cover for basically trillion-dollar thefts. Okay, so the VW case, I think, is the biggest story of the year, and it may actually fade away because the clowns don't understand what it means. To me, it's like a giant grappling hook thrown over the German wall, grabbing onto their big car maker, or if you prefer more of a human element, it's a lasso around a big German company, and more to come, around their neck, and look for a sequence like 10 prisoners walking along, all have a rope around their necks like in the movies.
Right.
That's what I think is happening with Volkswagen. And the U.S. does not like some of their emissions efficiency. They could be coming out with the best of all the electric cars, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I was told this morning by a client who's an airline pilot, and he kind of has a hobby following this story and this theme. And he said they've got a electric car whose battery can be charged rapidly in 15 minutes, as opposed to 2.5 hours.
Right. Okay.
That's not what the United States and the Rockefellers want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's about. I mean, I could go on, but that's the basic point.
So basically what you're saying is that this is a message being sent to Germany, which is the biggest player in Europe, to stay within the dollar fold. And if, I guess, they fall into line, then the story will disappear. Otherwise, we will, hear more about it in the coming days.
Yes, and it is far more than just to Germany. The French and the Swiss see this message, and all the emerging market nations. Just think of all the little suppliers that might be involved in the giant Volkswagen corporation.
Yes.
Okay, and some of them might be emerging market. I don't have all the facts before me, but it's a message that, if you're an Indian company, you're going to say, oh, look what happened to Volkswagen. We don't want that to happen to us. Let's stay on the dollar lane. I call it the King Dollar Court.
Right. So there's cracks that you've been talking about in the dollar system. They are the fissures are getting bigger, and so the measures that are being taken to prevent the complete breakup from happening are getting more desperate by the sounds of it.
Yes. Think of it as retaining the members of the King Dollar Court, or a better phrase, remaining slaves on one knee in the King Dollar Court.
So, I guess related to this topic, of course, the dollar, is that the Fed once again decided not to raise rates. Now, you have been saying that for a long time, that it is impossible that they will raise rates. Do you have anything to say about what transpired last week or the week before, when they, despite all the hype that they're going to put it up in September, nothing happened again?
I yawned. I thought this was a no-brainer. Anyone, in my opinion, who thought that there was going to be a rate hike because they have to,
right,
I think is operating with a Bush-like 85 IQ to begin with, and second, doesn't understand jack shit about the derivative machinery behind the U.S. Treasury bond complex. We've been on this topic before, but basically what you have is a case where the U.S. Fed, the Federal Reserve, I call it U.S. Fed because their offices in the United States, they engaged in more taper talk. Did we not cover this in the summer of 2013?
Yes, we did.
And it came back. Well, what are they doing? They're trying to manage the perceptions that form the basis of the integrity for the U.S. dollar and the U.S. Treasury bond as trading vehicle. And, they can do all they want and try to manage the impression, but they're still stuck with a third world African monetary policy. You can't print money and cover the U.S. debt. Forget about redemption of other Wall Street holdings for treasuries. You cannot cover the U.S. government $1 trillion deficit every year with printed money. That's what Zimbabwe does. You can't do that. So the rest of the world is looking to diversify out, find a new system to manage trade, and this is the basis of the gold trade note idea coming up. But there's a whole lot more that makes it simple to conclude they couldn't raise rates. If they raise rates, it would interfere with the feeder tube, I call it, for the interest rate swap derivative. They take the free money, they convert it into demand for a 10-year bond.
Right.
And gee, that covers a lot of demand for the treasuries. I mean, they can't interfere with the feeder tube. Mm-hmm. Okay, there's another side. It torpedoes all the Wall Street bond carry trade. They're borrowing short and they're investing in the 10-year and the 30-year. So again, the Fed's not going to be able to interfere with the feeder tube for the bond carry trade. If they want to wreck their own balance sheet, fine, a rate hike would do that. If they want to wreck the interest rate derivative machinery that keeps demand for the Treasury bond, fine, they can do that. If they want to destroy quickly in 2 months the entire Wall Street banking system, fine, they can do that with a rate hike. So that this is just, they don't want to raise and double and triple the borrowing costs for the U.S. $1 trillion deficit every year. If they want to do that, yeah, do it with a rate hike. So what we saw a couple of days ago was Janet Yellen fainting at the podium before the U.S. Congress.
I guess just the thought of having to raise rates is causing her to some nightmares, I imagine.
Well, here's my interpretation of a more facetious nature. She shit in her pants and covered it up by fainting. Now, this is getting very much late in the stage. The zero interest rate causes a lot of problems, misallocation of assets, improper pricing of stocks. Look at the stock market boom. It's largely a result of the low interest rate. They got these, it's called the Fed valuation model. And if you have lower rates, you have higher stock values. Well, naturally, it's part of the pricing model. Okay, well, it doesn't work nowadays. And also, you got all this free money rolling around. And the Fed, unlike ever before, is a major stockholder in the U.S. stock market. They hold gigantic swaths of S&P 500 blocks. And so do the Wall Street banks. So this is a very artificial system now we have with the Fed. They cannot raise rates. And when they decide that they will raise rates, there's a real easy conclusion to make. The U.S. has been ordered to, in order to destroy and scuttle the USS dollar. Ordered by the East, your game is up, your days are over, raise the rates, and kill your system.
Sorry, go ahead.
And enter the third world. It's time. That's what a rate hike means.
So that's what we were expecting to see, in the latter part of last year and into this year. But it seems like there is another delay. Like, what did you say that you see that this reset has been pushed back by a year?
Yeah, I think the reset. It's very complicated. But here's some of the main points. A year ago, a year and a half ago. It was early 2014, and some agreements have been made with over 100 nations that there would be a reset done, which would change some of the very, very small currencies. I mean, a lot of talk goes around about the Iraqi dinar and the Vietnam dong, and I don't give a rat's ass about either one. That's a distraction story, and it was a sucker play. A lot of people invested in them, and I don't think they're going to see a dime. J.P. Morgan, Hillary, Geithner, Paulson, they all cashed out. They don't cash out if there's more to be made. They cash out when the game's over. So you got that con going. But the reset is largely about changing the major currencies relative to gold. And they like to call it a reset of the currencies.
Right.
Like the currency is going to be worth half as much versus gold. In other words, gold is going to be worth twice as much versus the currency.
Right.
The reset is to bring back the gold standard in the currency market. It's the gold currency standard. It's a return to the gold standard. The reset is a gold standard return. It has nothing to do with the Vietnam dong. That's for the ding-dongs out there. It has nothing to do with the Iraqi dinar. That's for the Looney Tunes out there. Okay, so we had a delay in January and February of 2014. It was called the Ukraine war. U.S. said, we're not ready yet. We're going to offer you a war, and we're going to steal that gold in Kiev. So they got themselves 33 tons of gold, bought a little time, got a little bit more integrated in the human organ black market, set up better bases for transporting the Afghan heroin, not just in Kosovo now, but in Ukraine, heading over to all the NATO bases of Europe for distribution of the heroin. Okay, so Ukraine delayed the reset. Oh my gosh. The reset appears to be an event to retire the dollar as the global reserve currency. That is the reset. No more dollar as the reserve currency in major banking systems. And what does that result in? Diversification out of the treasuries from 20 or 30 major nations around the world, and a couple trillion or more dollars dumped. The reset was going to be a diversification event out of the treasury bonds into gold. They're going to replenish and recapitalize the global banking system because the U.S. has got QE and monetary inflation undermining the entire global banking system. Do you want a destruction of the global economy as a result of undermining the global banking system? No. So the world wants a reset to get rid of the dollar as the basis for trade, to get rid of the treasury bond as the basis for the banking system, and move forward with gold as the banking standard. So the reset was the gold currency standard and the gold banking standard, but through the gold trade standard as well, with letters of credit, the gold trade notes. So this is a very big event, and appears to be in the last month or two, following or coincident with the IMF decision not to include the Chinese RMB in their currency basket, the special drawing rights, SDR, the dollar, British pound, the euro, and the yen. The RMB was not going to be included. It just wasn't ready for prime time. So there was an admission by China that they're not quite ready with the RMB, their yuan currency. RMB stands for renminbi. It's the same thing as the Chinese yuan currency. So the Chinese admitted we're not quite ready with internationalization. We don't have enough reserves in the banking system of the world based in RMB bonds. I think it's something like 1.7%, 1.9% of all the global reserves are in RMB bonds. So it's not enough. They're not ready. And the U.S. said, okay, we could use a little more time because we in Washington and New York have a lot more trillions that we wish to steal. And we have a couple more wars we'd like to expand to, and a couple more economies we'd like to destroy on the other side of the world, and a few more central banks we'd like to raid for their gold. That's how the U.S. operates. So the Chinese said, okay, we'll give you a little more time because we're busy setting up the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank for big, big projects. We're also real busy in bringing online the projects for pipelines like Iran to Pakistan, like Iran to Syria. The Syrian war is all about blocking the Iran pipeline for gas to the European market that would hit the Syrian port. So the reset's a very big event, and it's going to turn the world upside down, Dash.
Could it coincide with this? I was talking to Jeff Nielsen yesterday, and he said that this reset would coincide with the U.S. elections in 2016. That would be a good time to do, have some big turmoil going on.
Well, that's a good timing for the turnover, but I'd just like to remind people of something that The Voice has been saying now for the last 3 or 4 months. They might want to do a delay on the reset, but the system, like the dollar, the treasury bonds, trade system, and all this, banks and insolvency and all this, the system might collapse before they're ready.
What's been going on, like the dumping, we've talked about in the past, the dumping of the treasuries, the moving of the trade agreements that nation after nation and regions have signed that are bypassing the dollar. So the move away from the dollar system has been going on for some time now, And I guess it's only that what we are waiting for is the final act in this play. So, but we are probably already into the fifth or sixth inning, I would think.
We're waiting for the captains on the USS Dollar to walk the plank. And they're not ready yet. They're not willing yet. They've got more to steal.
Right.
These wars are about wrecking economies to make easier the fascist state, the political state they're trying to expand. This Arab Spring is not about installing democracy in nations.
Okay, you know what? Let me interrupt you here. Let's actually move to the Middle East, and let's talk about the Iranian oil supply, the Syrian refugee problem, and the Saudis at the same time. We can cover that region in this segment, if you don't mind.
No, that's fine.
Go right ahead, tell us.
That was a question.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Let's talk about Iran with this. Apparently what they're going to be supplying is going to be increasing quite dramatically, and how that is going to impact oil prices, and what damage does it do to the U.S. energy markets, or what are the implications of that? Plus, what's going on with these Syrian refugees, and I heard Saudi Arabia may be experiencing their own Saudi Spring soon.
Yes. Let's just start with the energy market here.
Okay.
Relative to Iran. Okay, I don't want to get into a long diatribe about the Iran sanctions and violations and all this. They had not nuclear ambitions. They had a nuclear component to their electricity grid. Okay. They had refinement. And people said, oh gosh, does that mean they're trying to build a bomb? No. Refinement is necessary to operate the nuclear plants for electricity generation. When they don't have missile technology, they don't have delivery system for any kind of bomb. I mean, wake the hell up. This is propaganda of the most immature and naive, stupid variety. So we have these nuclear talks. The nuclear talks are not about keeping Iran in line for proliferation. It's about keeping Iran in line regarding oil output and regarding payments that are outside the dollar system. Iran was the biggest violator, far worse than Saddam Hussein, for sales of oil and gas outside the dollar. So he got bigger sanctions, and we couldn't attack them because they're a bigger nation, 75 million people as opposed to 25 in Iraq, and Iran had protectors called Russia and China. So if we invaded Iran, we were going to get resistance by Russia and China military. So we didn't. We did sanctions. Now, what has Iran done since early 2013 when the sanctions came on? They've been buying Chinese-made extra-large super tankers and filling them up. They've got 20 huge super tankers, larger than usual, ready for delivery, filled with oil. They've got 100 million barrels of oil sitting in tankers. And they announced that very soon, as soon as green lights are given by the political morons who are fighting using the U.S. propaganda, they have permission to unload 500,000 barrels a day on the oil market immediately. And they say in 2 or 3 months it'll be 1 million barrels a day. So that's 500,000 immediately and 1 million imminently. That guarantees the oil price will not rebound in any kind of recovery anywhere near $80 to $90 a barrel, which is what the Wall Street banks need and what the big U.S. energy companies need. Now, I don't want to get into the whole issue. I already touched on it a little bit, how we stole the Arab gold and the Arabs dropped off the petrodollar. Let's leave that as it is, because there's a lot of stupidity out there that the U.S. wanted a lower oil price to punish Russia. I don't believe that for more than 1 minute. It has a little bit of merit that we wanted to damage the Russian economy and their main income source. They're not a cheap oil producer like the Saudis are. But the Iranian situation with the imminent oil output makes sure that this $45, $50 price range might be the upper end, because at the same time the new Iran oil comes on, the global economy is slipping farther and farther and deeper into the recession. We have a global economic recession that I believe is directly related to QE and the bond purchase program by the Fed. All right.
Right.
So, we have a lot going on with the Iranians and a lot going on with the energy sector being destroyed. All the companies in the energy industry.
So sorry to interrupt you, but what's this Iran deal that the U.S. has been, making with Iran? Like, does that mean that they are basically abandoning the Saudis and now hitching their wagon with Iran?
I don't think so. I think the United States is not going to be hitching its wagon to anything in the Middle East. We've lost Saudis as a partner. They're very much in the Chinese camp now, courting Russia at the same time. We've never had Iran in our camp. They hate our guts. They call us big Satan. They call us liars. And we are liars. And our leaders are Satanists. So when they call us Satanists and liars, they're exactly right. The Iranians are never going to partner with the United States. What they're going to do is talk nice to the Americans and maybe eliminate from their political rhetoric about how they want to destroy Israel. That's one of the big things that must stop for Iran to become a more viable member in trade, commerce, and on the world stage. Now, the big element that's important regarding the oil price is that all the major oil companies are suffering from a lower oil price. Many of them put on these oil hedges, and that enabled them, say, a year ago, to continue operating their businesses as though the oil price was $100. Right. It's a zero-sum game, Desh. So when say, Exxon on many of its projects covered 80% of its output to be on hedges that made it equivalent to selling at $100 per barrel for all their output. Okay, that's temporary. That's not a 10-year hedge. They tend to be 1-year hedges, 18-month hedges, 2-year hedges, 6-month hedges. They're shorter in time. They're temporary. They're not permanent. So when the oil company has a beneficial hedge that allows them to continue to make money on their projects, it means that there's a banker on the other side that loses money.
Right. They got to cover that hedge. Yes, that makes sense.
They cover that hedge.
Right.
Okay. So you've got a number of Wall Street banks now who are losing in the trillions, not billions. They're losing in the trillions. I'm thinking it's a couple $1 trillion, give or take. Wall Street banks are losing a couple trillion on underwriting the oil hedges used in a legitimate manner by energy firms for the last year and a half or two. Okay, they're going to expire. And when they expire, it means that all the projects that required the $85, $90, $88, $92 price in order to make any money, they're not going to make any money anymore, and they're probably going to be shut down.
Well, they'll be mothballed, and I heard a lot of them already have been.
A lot of them have been, but not all of them. The ones that have been hedged are still running. Right. And when they expire, they're not going to be running because they're not going to have the protection of the hedge, which allows them to sell essentially at the $100 price. I like making the argument, well, it's a $100 price versus a $50 reality. Well, if you got the $50 reality and your oil hedge permits you to sell with the $100 hedge, okay, fine, you can make some money. As soon as that ends, you stop the operations. Now, I think we're going to see real soon some evidence that a couple of Wall Street banks are on death's door.
Morgan Stanley?
Well, that's my principal name, but something happened after 2008 in the Lehman Brothers event.
Right.
Something happened, and that was, okay, they killed off Bear Stearns because they were long gold and short the dollar. They killed off Lehman Brothers because they were the biggest player in mortgage bonds, and they happened to also be convenient. You know, in reality, Goldman Sachs was the biggest player in mortgage bonds, but Goldman Sachs had a plan: kill Lehman, take control of AIG, and get 100 cents on the dollar on all the insurance for those bonds. And that's what Lehman Brothers did, and still has not been caught on that. They've been fingered, but they've not been caught and penalized for it. Now what we're going to see is that since 2008, all the Wall Street banks are in the same boat. What they've done is they spread the derivative risk around so that all the Wall Street banks have roughly the same risk. Morgan Stanley might start it off. I remember back in 2010, the second half of the year, Morgan Stanley, just in the second half of 2010, put on $8.5 trillion worth of derivatives, and I think they were primarily like 80%, 90% interest rate derivatives. So figure $8 trillion in interest rate derivatives, and what happened as a result? Oh, there was a great rally. The world found safe haven in the treasury bonds. No, they didn't. Wall Street put on the interest rate derivatives, and the derivatives produce the artificial demand. So these hedges are going to blow up in the Wall Street faces, and I think that's what this reverse repo, failures to deliver on the treasury bonds totaling $40 billion a day, which is $1 trillion a month, that's your $1 trillion in hidden QE. So I think it's to bail out the Wall Street banks in a hidden manner for their oil hedges.
Makes sense, Jim. Makes sense. And another, I guess, nail in the coffin of the king dollar, as you would say. Now, one of these big stories also, which I am not sure if you've been following or not, is what's been going on with this Syrian so-called migrant crisis. Okay. First of all, I love the way they've changed the terminology, and all these illegal aliens have now become migrants. So, what is there an agenda that's at play here as well, where like literally millions of these guys are suddenly showing up in Europe? I don't know how the heck they get from Turkey to Europe, without crossing all the borders and everything without any problems. But seems like there's a whole flood of them making their way into Europe and Canada and United States and Australia, and all these countries are, just opening up their doors and welcoming these guys. What is all that about?
When the United States went in to block the Iran pipelines to reach the Syrian port and head to the European market, they didn't want anything to join up with the European market on the natural gas side. And that's the basis of the Ukraine war. They didn't want the Russian Gazprom pipelines to reach Europe either. And those are harder to block. But the Iran pipelines were easier to block. All you need to do is create a war zone, and there's no construction to complete the pipeline. This is not complicated. If someone is throwing grenades in your backyard, you cannot have a barbecue.
Right.
So, as a result of the U.S. destruction of the Syrian economy by means of lots and lots of bombings and military drones hitting civilian targets, I wondered almost a year ago, I think it was right around Christmas time, January, why are drones hitting the marketplace in Damascus where food is being purchased? Is that a terrorist outlet? So we basically commit war crimes in the United States and bomb civilian targets and call it a war on terrorism. Who's the terrorist? I think it's the ones operating the drones that attack the civilian targets.
Yeah, I heard a lot of the infrastructure in Syria, like power plants, etc., water treatment plants, have also been targeted.
Yeah, and bridges. and there have even been one or two schools hit. So I guess the schools are terrorist breeding grounds. Is that how we're supposed to think? All right, the result is you've got millions of refugees that cannot be fed. Now here's the twist. If you're Ahmad with a family of 4, wife and 2 kids, and you want to get to Italy, and you don't have any money, your job got blown up with a drone strike, you can't feed yourself, you can't get to the market because it's on fire, how do you get to Italy on a boat? Who's paying the bill?
That's a good question. That's what I've been wondering. Who's been, there's a lot of money and logistical support has to be provided for that number of people to, move that far. So somebody's doing it.
Well, the Austrian, not Australian, the Austrian government intelligence came out with a report last week saying it was the U.S. government NGOs, they're front corporations. They're paying the refugees for passage. Some of them are found out not to have money for passage, they're thrown overboard. I mean, it doesn't matter. They're not human anyway, are they? I mean, that's how Washington thinks. So what's the hidden motive here? Okay, the proximal cause of the refugees, that's what I call them, not migrants. A migrant is someone who crosses the Mexican border to pick lettuce and fruits in California and goes home. No, the refugees who are swarming into Europe are permitting 1 in 100 of being an ISIS guerrilla terrorist. They're not doing thorough checks at the border.
Right.
I mean, they even closed the Austrian-German border because they can't control it anymore. The trains are loaded on and they can't do adequate checks, and I don't think they trust the information that they get when they even do the passport swipe in their system. They don't have records of all these Islamic terrorists working for ISIS taking orders from Langley. Langley organized it. Langley trained ISIS. Langley hired all the different guerrillas for ISIS. Langley supplied them with munitions. Langley trained them on their battle techniques. And now, guys, I mean, just a quick 2-minute background on ISIS. Take a look back 2 years ago. The United States military backed out of Iraq. No more, they call it the evacuation of Iraq. Mission accomplished, I guess, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay, right. But what they complained about was the Iraqi parliament was 2/3 Shiite and could not be controlled. They preferred the secular Baath, B-A-A-T-H, group, and they preferred the Sunnis, who were, more mild-mannered neighbors. And what instead they got were the more feisty Shiites who had closer ties to the neighbor, Iran. Iran and Iraq share a large border. Okay, and the distance between Tehran and Baghdad is not far. I doubt it's much more than, say, New York to Chicago. I think it's probably a lot less. Anyway, you had this problem where the Shiites were controlling things in the Iraqi government, so the United States decided, all right, we're getting out of town. Well, what filled the void but ISIS? So the U.S. basically said behind closed doors, we're going to remove the military and introduce our ISIS asset and include some beheadings that are, faked on television to scare the hell out of American citizens on ISIS. And a couple of months ago, was it even you who told me that John McCain's computer was found to contain a bunch of communications with ISIS guerrillas?
But didn't he go for a photo op down there with those guys?
I think that was part of the story, but the one that stuck in my mind was that there was some messages on the McCain computer. We're not talking about child pornography here, which is what they use to smear those whistleblowers, but McCain's computer contained communications with the studios that made the fake videos of the beheadings.
No, that wasn't me, but that does not surprise me.
Okay. All right. Now, when you have a beheading, and this is just basic anatomy 101, there's so much blood pressure in the body that the blood squirts out for 3 or 4 feet.
Right.
And it doesn't stop for several seconds. Okay, in all the beheading videos, there's not a single blood squirting incident. No evidence, none whatsoever. That's your hint that it's faked.
Right.
All right, I could go on and on about that, but all right, there's more to this. We got 100,000 refugees, give or take. They're mostly coming into the Italy ports. There's limited checks at customs, and I think you're going to see on the order of about 1,000 ISIS guerrilla terrorists occupying their little cells across Western Europe. And in the next several months, there's going to be a lot of explosions, and I think many of them are going to be in Germany.
So it's going to be like the Red Brigade of the 70s all over Europe.
Yes, exactly. The Red Brigade, which was all, again, part of the Langley Gladio project.
Right. Jim, we have about 10 minutes, so can we quickly touch on this topic of with the dollar rising, it's going to, putting a lot of stress on the emerging markets that have a lot of dollar-denominated debt, and there are reports now of shortages of gold and silver. So if you could just conclude with those two topics briefly, that would be great.
Sure. The emerging market debt is the big pimple on the other side of the world, full of pus. That's the consequence of the dollar rising. Now, I remember way back, 4 years ago, we were saying things like among my colleagues, all this cheap money is going to cause severe problems down the road. You can't extend that kind of credit around the world and expect no problems later. You can't have cheap money. What happens if you've got a reckless teenager who suddenly has tens of thousands of dollars available to him, and he's cutting classes, not going to school, not showing up for jobs, not taking summer jobs, not meeting with his best friend. He's going out there and he's buying drugs, he's stealing stuff, he's just getting involved with weapons. This is what happens with free money. It corrupts. And in the United States and North America, what you had was a lot of free money going to the energy firms. It funded largely the shale industry. It was free money. It kept the whole cost structure down because the money side was free. Okay, in the emerging market nations, they're more and more now being called emerging market economies, the EMEs. They extended about $5 or $6 trillion worth of credit.
Yes.
Now, when their currency, let's just get simple math. If you got a $5 trillion debt to a group of nations, and their currencies all drop by 20%, does that not mean they've got an extra trillion in debt that they weren't planning on?
Absolutely.
Yes. So that's the problem now. An extra trillion in debt. The emerging market nations cannot handle because at the same time their export trade has slipped, their economy has slipped, and their banking system has turned more insolvent. So we've got a string of emerging market nation bankruptcies, not bankruptcy, defaults coming up. Just like in North America, you've got the string of energy firm defaults. In the emerging markets, you've got a string of debt defaults that are coming. And this is very bad news. And people who say things like, well, this is just like, a smaller version of the Asian meltdown of 97, 98. No, it's not. It's 10 times bigger. So in the United States, we have a phenomenon that I think is going to be 5 times bigger than Lehman. And in the emerging market, I think we've got an event that's going to be at least 5 times bigger than the Asian meltdown that started in Thailand and extended to Japan and Korea. This is very, very big, and I think the result of the emerging market debt meltdown is that when they clear the dust and get the big brooms out and get the rubble off their table and off their stages, they're going to be more willing to say, all right, this is a perfect time to get rid of the dollar system.
I think it was John Kerry or one of these guys, he urged the Ukrainians to default on their debt to Russia. I suppose the roles will be reversed very soon when all these emerging markets will be looking to default on their debt to Wall Street.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of nations are going to see that their treasury bond dumpings, it's going to become more of a panicky dump in the next several months. Nations like Korea is a good example. They're going to want to get rid of their treasury bonds and buy gold or Chinese government bonds. If they want to stay in paper, they're going to go to Chinese government RMB bonds. And if they want to go to the real McCoy of money, they're going to go into gold bullion. But I think a lot of nations are going to be abandoning the dollar system. And when the crisis erupts bigger on the emerging market economy side, it's going to be a perfect time for them to say, we're done with the dollar. We just defaulted on you. We're not going to set it up in dollar again. We just got wrecked. It's like the house got burned down. We're not going to build it with the same kind of wood. We're going to have a different design. We're not going to use the same dollar type of wood. Okay, that's what's coming. And it means that on 5 different fronts, the dollar's dead. And the last people to understand it are the Americans.
Oh, yeah,
I talk to a lot of people, Dash, and honestly, 9 out of 10 have no idea the dollar is used internationally in trade.
Yes.
I said, aren't you even aware that when foreign nations buy Saudi gold, they pay for it in dollars? And they go, well, no, I don't follow any of that stuff. Hey, did you know the Red Sox are really doing well? I mean, they change the subject. They don't understand what the dollar is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree. Anyhow, so that's another piece of the puzzle about this reset that's falling into place, and I think a lot of these things are going to definitely be playing out over the next few months and the next year. Now, finally, about gold and silver, there are shortages reported. There are premiums, that are getting higher, even on coins that you have heard about. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the shortage is becoming really, really acute. I mean, there's been a shortage for over a year. You've had tremendous purchases in India, tremendous purchases in China, and other parts of the world. You've got a drainage pretty much, not entirely, of Dubai. So we're at the point now where things are broken badly in the gold and silver market, and something just happened in the last couple of weeks. Well, maybe it's been building up, but it's become more apparent in the last couple of weeks. It's called the silver cycle. And you could call it the silver recycle phenomenon. But they've been calling it for decades the silver cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what it is. Because it's broken, and it's very important that it's broken right now. The COMEX would derive a certain percentage, I mean like 10, 15, 20% of all the input into the silver market from the recycling industries.
Right.
You'd have an estate sale, and an aging couple, they died, their kids took on a bunch of the heirlooms, and they sold and got $15,000 worth of silver. Okay. That's what they do. They melt down the silverware and other silver objects. It's not really so much, motherboards on computers. No, you do have some electronics meltdown. But there's a big recycling component to the silver market of at least 10% of the supply, and it's all gone. The pricing of the recycled silver, they call it junk silver. The pricing for a long, long, long time has been like 15%, 10%, 12%, 20% below the spot.
Right.
It's to encourage and to provide a profit for those who are doing the meltdown. and delivering that silver for a small profit to the COMEX within the system. It's all gone because the silver junk price is now about 15% above spot. Never seen before.
You're right. Actually, I was at a coin shop and he has some junk silver coins. And yeah, you're right. They were above spot. They were not, they're only 80%, but yet they were still above spot.
Well, if he were to go to a refiner that has, as a business, accepting the junk silver, he'd get even less.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay. Now, what we're starting to see, apart from the silver cycle being broken, apart from all that, we're seeing a new phenomenon where they're called mint coins. And it's like, think of like the Canadian maple leafs or the Silver Eagle Americans. The silver coins say after 2000. They're not old. They're not real old. They're 15 years and less.
That's right.
Well, it used to be that the 2004 silver coins from North America would have about the same price as a 1-year-old coin. And that's not the case anymore.
You mean the older ones are getting more?
Yes. The 10-year-old coins now are being treated like collector items. The 10-year-old coins are not priced the same as the 1- and 2-year-old coins. The older coins are getting a premium of something like 20%.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, that's very big news, and it's recent, and it's significant, and it means the whole system is breaking down. They cannot stop the huge demand. I've got there were so many that happened in August that I put a special story in the hat trick letter. So-and-so from Baltimore, so-and-so from Toronto, so-and-so from Texas. There were a number of different stories, and there was one from London, and I think I even continued the theme in the September report that went out a few days ago. The gist of the story was they attended coin shows in North America and Western Europe, and there was almost nothing for sale in silver. I've been saying this now for 3 or 4 years. The breakdown in the gold and silver market is going to be seen in silver because that's where the industrial use is. And now we're seeing that's exactly where the recycle has been broken. So, client said, went to a Baltimore show, not a single silver coin there. Okay. Not a single silver coin there at a coin show. Why do they have a coin show? Well, because they have gold coins. So we're seeing
gold
a breakdown.
coins. They have other coinage which may not be precious metal. So I guess, but they're still old collector coins.
Yeah, the older collector coins, they're always available because that's a real market.
Right.
That's a supply and demand market. You got more supply come on, the price goes down. You got more demand come in, the price goes up. Those are stable, equilibrium-based markets. But the newer coins are not an equilibrium-based market. And here's the last thing to say regarding the shortage. JP Morgan is running out of gold. And my joke is they're running out of places to steal gold. They're using accounting games now to shift from the ledger item of eligible and registered. If there's a big shortage, suddenly there's a big shift you see in the accounting, and no more shortage. They had something like a 30% withdrawal on a single day of what JP Morgan held. And the word I'm hearing is that the demand from Asia, in particular China, is so great that JP Morgan cannot handle it, and the COMEX cannot handle it. So we're running short at the COMEX. And, all kinds of other little side stories are going on. Newmont and one other company just made an agreement to buy all of Barrick's North American gold operations. I mean, these are big stories.
Wasn't there an Indian company that bought the refiner? Matthew Johnson.
Johnson Matthey.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
I think so. I just found the name. It was Newmont and Kinross.
Right.
Just bought all the Barrick assets in the United States. Are we seeing maybe a liquidation of Barrick Gold? I mean, they're selling their non-U.S., non-North American assets, a lot of them to China, or China's taking a significant investment stake in them, which usually means that they're getting lined up first to buy the output. So we're seeing a lot of events, Dash, that indicate the COMEX is being cut out.
All right, that's it. Okay, Yahoo. Okay, on that note, Jim, sorry we're kind of out of time now. So Commander James of the Starship Golden Jackass.com. It's been a pleasure as always. Can you please go ahead and share with listeners about your website and your newsletter, the Hat Trick Letter, and any other tidbits you might want to share with them?
I'll be really brief here. The website has been around now for 11 and a half years with the newsletter. It's www.goldenjackass.com. I invite people to go to the website, click on the public page. You see a lot of public interviews. You see a few public articles. It's all free. Come up to speed, or fill in some of the background blanks, because many people have busy lives. They can't keep up with all the events happening because it's happening at a breakneck pace. But I invite people on the second time around to subscribe to the Hat Trick Letter. It's been in existence now 11 and a half years. I'm looking on the calendar here. We just posted the issue number 138. I mean, when I started this, I wasn't thinking about, well, gosh, we're going to have 10 and 12 years here doing this. No, I thought about, let's do this, let's build it, let's see what happens. So it's been a labor of love. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of work. It can be draining at times, but I rest up and get back to it a month later. I do these interviews in the meantime. But go to the goldenjackass.com website, read around, and sign up for the newsletter. You will not be disappointed.
All right. On that note, Jim, it's been a pleasure as always. Your information is second to none, and it's appreciated by me and by my listeners. And I wish you a wonderful day and a weekend down there. And we'll have to get back sooner rather than later, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of developments coming over the next few weeks that are going to be blowing our socks off.
Well, I'm convinced that's going to be happening, and it's really heating up, with Janet Yellen fainting on before the Congress, with Boehner resigning.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that. I don't know what that's about, but I'm sure there's.
Well, I think he's getting out of town before the ship collapses.
Absolutely. Okay.
Ship sinks. So there are going to be more. You saw Harry Reid, the senator of Nevada. He quit about 6 or 8 months ago. There's a story behind that.
So the rats are leaving the sinking ship. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
All right, Jim. Take care, buddy. We'll talk again soon.
All right, thanks. Bye now.
Bye now.
I don't know what tomorrow holds for me. It might bring pain, it might bring misery. But if Jesus holds my hand, I can make it to the promised land. I don't know what tomorrow holds for me. I can't say whether I'm gonna make it through this night, but Jesus, long time ago, made everything alright. It may be morning, it may be noon, the Lord is coming back one day so soon. I don't know what tomorrow holds for me. I don't know